everyone. I'm very excited to interview Sabu Francis. He is founder of Lumen Labs and SyncSpace. One thing which makes me very proud, like looking at Sabu's journey and like developing a whole software coming out in the BIM environment and making it open source and like thinking about that development. Uh, it's like very ahead of its time, and also it's my first IIT alumni interview. So Mr. Sabu did undergrad at IIT KGP, and I can't wait also to uncover some of the IIT hostel day stories. But thanks a lot, Mr. Sabu, to be on the show.
Thank you. My pleasure. Just call me Sabu. Mr. and all not needed.
Yeah,
Yeah, tell me, shoot.
yeah. So can you walk us through like what were the initial seed for developing tech? Like what were the limitations and how this idea of this came up?
Okay, so it came up. I was one of the earliest associate for Hafiz Contractor. Those days, Hafiz had just eight. We were just eight of us. It was a nice working atmosphere and very fast moving office. And as you may be knowing, Hafiz is today India's one of the leading architects and commercially pretty successful. Unfortunately, he's really not known for, one of those. A lot of academicians, for example, don't particularly like him, and which is very unfortunate. Hafiz is actually a very knowledgeable architect, and but there was a mismatch which I had seen. This is way back. I think both of you were just dreams in your mother's eyes. I think those days. This is way back, more than 30. I joined him in 84, 85, like that. So
Mhm,
that's quite some years back, 35, 36 years back. So what happened is, I just come out of IIT, and I'm experiencing this quite a different architect. Frankly, when I look back, it was an amazing serendipity. And the thing is, though being very talented, very knowledgeable, and bunch of really nice guys, working very hard and very sincere to whatever we want to deliver, and we had all kinds of crazy conversations about design and everything, all sincerity, everything. But still, finally, the end result is not many times not really up to the mark. So in that respect, I can understand the academicians and theoreticians and all the intellectuals
mhm.
saying that, oh, Hafiz Contractor is just a commercial architect. And he's not really an architect, which which is pretty tragic actually. Hafiz is mind-bogglingly well read and very knowledgeable about the subject. Had a bunch of very nice books, which I like literally devoured over there, and yet there was something missing. And so I kind of excused myself, and in fact, I don't remember when I left Hafiz, because I never really left him. I continued as an external associate for some of his projects, and it kind of wound down on its own. So that got me thinking. And I'm not from any rich family. I'm not from any construction background. I'm the first professional in my family and all that. So I started thinking that if a really talented architect is not really in a position to deliver many times, what am I going to do? I mean, I don't have anybody blessing on my shoulder and saying that, okay, you know what, I'm going to push you ahead. And it started with something as simple as that. And then I was just 25 and a half when I started my office. So are you able to hear me?
Yeah, yeah, yep,
I'm good.
yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So I who will join a 25 and a half year old architect, right?
Mhm.
So when I started my practice, there was nobody joining me. So I started getting more worried, that if I start looking at this topic. Hello, are you there?
Yep.
Everything seems to have frozen. Yeah. Should I
I,
switch off the camera for 2 minutes? Will that become better?
I think like I foresee like for you it might seem like a frozen screen, but Like we can hear you
Oh, okay,
clearly,
okay.
so like you can continue.
You can
Like it's
see me
fine.
also. I don't know whether I can.
Yeah, we
Okay,
can see you.
okay, okay, fine. So what happened is that so that was the situation that I wanted to set up my practice, and I wanted uh, to do a good job of whatever assignments I get, and but this in the back of the mind, I'm coming from this backdrop of not understanding how come these mistakes are happening in architecture.
Hmm.
So that's where it started. I started thinking, and then I said, how do I get good people to work with me? Nobody is there to work with me. I got some draftsmen, who those days, from my home state of Kerala. I'm from Kerala. So they're very nice, technically trained draftsmen who could hand draft. They were not architects. So I got few of those, and they were working for me. And I realized that that's not good enough, like, I mean, because they did not know designing. They don't know
Hmm.
what designing is. So what happened is, then I started asking some of my IT friends. I had some IIT Bombay, one of my very good friend, Narayan, his name is. So we started discussing about what really could be the kind of issues. So I asked one very simple question, that how does computers really help architects? How does it really? How can it help? And this is way back, right? And this is AutoCAD had just kind of come in, and there were these pirated versions of AutoCAD which were there, and I didn't particularly like that kind of using that kind of software and all. And then I tried it out. I said that there is doesn't seem to be anything very different from what I'm doing with this draftsman.
Hmm.
You know, so should I have? Is there a chat channel here just in case I'm losing you?
Yep.
Uh,
Yeah, it's a
so yeah, so in case I feel that I'm not audible or something, because I'm not getting any body language, so it's
Oh, okay. Yeah.
so I'm kind of little lost. That's why I was kind of hesitating. Anyway, so what happens is, 1 minute, let me just switch off my mobile. So there was this very simple question. It started with that: if I draw a shape, a closed shape on a piece of paper, and
Hmm.
I look at that closed shape, I've just drawn it, and the shape does not have any intelligence, right? But if I were to give a personality to that piece of paper, that piece of paper would say that I've enclosed this much area. The
Hmm.
moment you drew this shape on me, I kind of showed you this is the area which you got enclosed. So the paper is asking me that how come you don't know what the area is? You can see for yourself this is the area, right? How come you don't know what the area is? And so I had this kind of a metaphorical conversation with that shape, and I asked myself that our method of expressing architecture, when we have to talk about bounded areas, is little redundant, right? You first draw the shape. The paper knows the area because it is showing you the area, but you don't know what the area is.
Hmm.
Okay, so you have to then go over it again. So one of the things would be that if you're drawing a free form closed shape, you would put a grid on it and then figure out and then count the number of grids, graph grid, and then find out the area. That I said, that's crazy. Like, so we are doing the thing twice. And AutoCAD
Hmm.
those days, even now, actually, AutoCAD will do something similar. Like, you draw a polyline, you close the polyline, and then you say, give me the area. And AutoCAD will say, area, what area, where, what area? Select the entity.
Hmm.
And then that was like, and that was odd. Like, I said that, hey, hang on, your software is supposed to help me, and I am instructing my draftsman to draw these shapes, and they are not trained architects. So they are saying, when I say, okay, give me the area, he'll say, oh, what area, sir? What do you want? Because he's drawn many shapes. I kind of gave a sketch of, say, a apartment and many rooms. So he's not fully getting it, which of those rooms in that apartment, the area I would want.
Mhm.
So I started thinking that there is no logical basis for the drawing. You're just making shapes on the screen. And that I found it pretty weird, frankly. I said, how can you have a drafting software and I expect the drafting software? I mean, those days they were not calling it drafting, they were calling it CAD, computer aided design. I said, if it's a design software and if I've drawn a flow shape, you better tell me the area, right? I mean, I already drew it. Like, it started with something simple as that. So I was discussing with Nara and I said that why is it that a shape which the paper will understand, if the paper has a personality, if the paper understands, how come I am not able to understand? I have to calculate it once again.
Mhm.
Turns out that when I, so many years back, that's a very important question, right? Why is it that a device, which is a computer, into which you are depositing meaning into it, it stays quite dumb about the whole thing? It just preserved a set of lines and arcs and circles and whatnot. Like, so then I started figuring out, and all definite integrals and all that, and my very first thing was to discover a pretty interesting routine on a basic calculator,
Mhm.
the calculator which had basic in
Yeah.
it, programmable calculator. And I figured out a way that I can just, so my job was step by step. I gave myself small small challenges. I said, okay, if I was an ant and I was standing at the corner of a building, and then I moved from one corner to the next corner and went around tracing the outer perimeter of that building. And each time I turn right, I will use the positive number. Each time I go up, I will give the positive number. If I go left, I'll give a negative number. And if I go down, I'll give again a negative number. So that's the convention which I told myself. I said there has to be some way to tell the program that this is the these are the dimensions of each side of the you know of the building. And as you may know, in Bombay, most of the buildings are having orthogonal corners, though many of them, it may not be just a rectangle, but it will be a rectangle with going up and down like that. And then I cracked that and I realized that I could actually work out that area without redundancy. That means it's like a turtle graphics program kind of thing. So without repeating yourself, I could actually, it's a variation on the definite integral. It's nothing very difficult.
Mhm.
You can do it as an exercise. And then I got pretty thrilled with this whole thing that I can now identify a shape, give that shape to a program, and then the program is continuously updating me of what that area is. I don't have to ask it again.
Mhm.
Okay, now once that step got done, what happened is that I now have a mechanism by which I can deposit the linguistic elements of architecture, starting with just a bounded shape. Then I started asking more deeper questions, and I realized that there are some fundamental problems in the way architecture has been represented all these years. You know,
Mhm.
and if you look at the history of drawing, so I got into reading. I joined the library at Juhu, which is CDAC library. It's a pretty nice library, very
Mhm.
extensive, and I got involved in Prolog. uh, Prolog, as you may know, is a AI language, and I was very fortunate that I was doing all this programming with nobody whispering next to me saying, "Oh, you're doing programming in C, you're doing programming in C." Prolog, oh my God, that is too much. I mean, I'm a small time architect in Navi Mumbai, and I'm very curious to know why is this software not behaving the way I would want it to behave. I have got some real problems as an architect. I don't have intelligent people who are sitting down and giving me the talking design terms. I don't want people to talk graphics to me. What
Correct.
am I going to do with graphics? Okay, so it was pretty interesting. So I started kind of peeling the onion layers, one below the other, one behind the other, and started understanding. And I got into a fair amount of, and look back and kind of clean up all the muddled areas and stitch up all the dots. I don't want to bore you with all the, if and then and all that. But what happened is that essentially architecture today is the only domain where this debate about what do you really represent in a computer of your subject is not really extensively discussed.
Mhm.
And this is a very, very serious problem. It is become so serious that, of course, I'm a biased party, so I am kind of looking at the same evidence all the time to say, oh, you know what, I was right, it is a linguistic challenge which we are having. But even if I account for that bias, it is a very serious lacuna. You take any specialist subject, you take mathematics, you take
I think we lost you now. Oh, yeah, now it's audible. Yeah, you broke for like 2 seconds. Yeah.
okay, okay, because I got a message saying something is missing. Anyway, so uh,
Yeah, it's
again,
is it
I'm
now
getting a
it's
message here.
working.
Should I change my connection?
Or maybe
Hello.
like, yeah, try maybe like should we it might be
I'll just
sometimes like
shift over to another connection.
okay.
He's talking about 1984, Mayur.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. And like those are like important issues which no one talks about. I see.
Yeah, he joined
Yeah,
back.
Hello. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, now I can see both of you were animated. Otherwise, everybody was frozen again. I could not see Richa at all. Anyway, good. At least some movement. I think hopefully this is a better connection. And so what I was talking about was, yeah, architecture is the only field where really the linguistic challenge which is there. What are the ingredients you deposit into it? How do you look at computers as a linguistic device? You know, M- m- even if you were to do programming, I program in quite a lot of languages. I program in more than 12 languages. I started with C and then C++ and then Prolog and Lisp and everything. Basically, I use it as a set of screwdrivers, and I'll say, okay, this doesn't work, I'll work with that, and it doesn't work, I'll work with that, like that. So the issue was never about being obsessed with computing. The issue was that why is it my field, which is architecture, is not getting expressed the way I want to get it expressed, so that I can think about it. And there lies the seed of the problem, which I saw why people like Hafiz and others are not really producing the things which they say that they can produce. And I know for sure that Hafiz has done brilliant work in some situations, but many times the thing becomes so fragile. The real reason is that each of us are expressing architecture in our own peculiar ways,
Hmm.
and we go about depositing the data in a manner that it really cannot be so easily retrieved, because the other person is not retrieving it in the manner which they would want to retrieve it.
Hmm.
And part of it is to do with the kind of false aura around the field, as if we are very creative, we have to have our independent way of thinking, and we have to do things. I'm very, very concerned about the environment, and a lot of evocative language, and a lot of fluff and philosophy and whatnot. And I started scratching my head. I said that, come on, musicians are also pretty creative. They
Hmm.
have a lot of stuff. Very creative. Writers are very creative. They're not sitting down and cribbing. you asked me to write it in the English alphabet. I cannot write. I'm sorry. You're hurting my creativity. You'll
Hmm.
not see a poet saying that, oh, you asked me to write it in alphabets. What are you talking about? Like, I need
Yep.
one extra alphabet between P and Q. Like, then I will write my
Hmm.
poem. Like, I said, it's crazy. So when architects are sitting down saying, the language of architecture is so and so and this and that and whatnot now, and then they'll do something which is many times quite tantalizing and quite nice. Not that bad, okay? I'm just dramatizing it. To forgive my drama. Like, so so what happens is that we are kind of isolating ourselves from the responsibility of depositing criticizable material. You
Yep.
understand? So we just make
We have
drawings.
our own bubble.
Yeah, we are in our own bubble. We are not even in a common bubble. We are in our individual little bubbles.
Yeah.
So we are in our own little silo of our own. If somebody gets a housing project and he'll work on sustainability, work on this and that and all the nice things. Nothing wrong there.
Hmm.
And uh, go around making a lot of drawings and then apply some philosophy and Deleuze and Derrida and deconstruction and all kinds of
Yeah.
evocative language. And you are in the audience and you're wondering, what the heck am I going to say anything about it? I don't mind evocativeness. I mean, you try to read James Joyce. I really can't understand because it's from Dublin area and Ireland and all that. But that stream of consciousness way of writing is phenomenally captivating. You read
Hmm.
James Joyce, Dubliner, some of his other books, Ulysses and all, and it captivates you because it's really like crazy prose. You read Steinbeck's Cannery Row, like it is like amazingly rich. You read V.S.
Hmm.
Naipaul's Miguel Street. So I said that these guys are also very evocative. Okay, why architects are the only one who have to feel evocative?
Correct.
So yet there is something called the English alphabet or whichever language alphabet, which there is no emotion, no controversy. Nobody will say, "Oh, you wrote letter A. I think that's not A. That is M." Nobody is going to say that. A musician will say, "Oh, you played D sharp. I thought that was D." They're not going to say
Is a
that.
standard.
Yeah, they are going to consider that as a datum. So the building blocks, the core ingredients, linguistic ingredients of that field is has to be stable. Okay,
Hmm.
if it is stable, then you be free with whatever you want to express. I'm not here to sit down and say, oh, you should not have evocative ways of looking at architecture or anything, my mockery about all that. I mean, you should be
Hmm.
free to say what you want to say. Okay, so in
Hmm.
linguistics, there's a term called production. That's a word called production. And production basically means that I'm saying something in English, say, for example, I can just add that, okay, I said so and so, and Mayur Mistry was hearing what I said, and Richard Gupta said to that, and I can continuously keep adding something or the other and keep extending my work. That I can be very
Yeah.
productive, basically. Okay.
Hmm.
So English does not say that because you use the English alphabets, you are restricted only to certain ways of doing things. In fact, one of the reasons a form of expression is considered to be a language is when it has this faculty of production. If it doesn't have that production, that means it's not really a language. It's some maybe some smileys or something like that. Okay,
Hmm.
so I started figuring out what could be the thing which goes into representing the core ingredients of that software, whatever you have to do. So my investigation was more about what the language should go, and the software was a vehicle to drive that ahead. It is still a vehicle. I don't consider that I am shifted to software or anything. I am very much
Yeah.
a true-blooded architect, and I'm very bothered about the way we have turned out as a set of intellectuals. Because if you very closely examine, you look at the history of music, for example. Music had its own share of debates and arguments and hassles about how do they settle the core ingredients over there. There is this nice discussion. I don't want to, get into music theory discussion. I'm also an amateur musician, but it's very fascinating. If you really look at it, they had a problem on how to express music using what is known as a natural notation, natural scale.
Mm-hmm.
Music expressed using natural scales, which is pure integers and all, 3 by 4 and 5 by 6 and
Uh-huh.
7 by 8, like that. And then they found that you can't transpose the music, you can't shift the scales. Like, so if somebody wakes up one day with a sore throat and he can't sing at a higher pitch, he has to sing at a lower pitch. They could not transpose the whole music. So the music should have been transposable, but because of the way the internal representation of music were concerned, it didn't work out. So a lot of debate. And when is this happening? In the 14th century. No email, no WhatsApp, no and they got that together. They got that act
Mm-hmm.
together. They figured out the musical tablature and the kind of symbols you have to use on that, and how to go about expressing it. And they are bloody well as evocative as any architect is, as creative as any architect is. Same as like the poets and writers are also evocative. Architects are the only guys. No, 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 no. We'll use drawings. We'll just use
Yeah.
drawings. What we do is our loud. We will do. We'll think through the whole problem and all. Like, and that's why most of the architects' offices are really not gone on a very feudal way of working. You have a
Mm-hmm.
pyramidal structure. You have a guy at the top who's sitting down and figuring out what needs to be done. Okay, and he's standing like Lord Moses with 10 commandments. Okay, and then he comes into the office and says, this is what you need to design. And the reason is there's no real communication. You're not putting stuff together in that. If you see the way musicians work, you know you see the pretty interesting uh, kind of backstory behind Jethro Tull's Thick as a Brick. He's got this beautiful album called Thick as a Brick, which is literally one musical composition right across the whole record. I think it's a double record also. And it was like kind of a magnum opus kind of thing, beautiful composition. People kind of listen to it in parts as if they're a separate song, but he insists that it's actually a huge some 4-hour composition or something. Now, how did Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull get that thing together? He's not the only musician in that particular band, right? He is playing with other musicians, so they got together, some basement somewhere which was leak, and he used to practice. And he used to go back and write down the music, okay, in his room or wherever he was, and then give it to
Mm-hmm.
his other musicians for them to know. That is called communication.
Yep.
This is communication, and at the level of the musical notation, there's no controversy. There's no controversy. You're not debating on the ingredients which is there. But
Mm-hmm.
that we forget that we are not really communicating. So the
Mm-hmm.
breakthrough I got was I discovered this bit of fractal mathematics in architecture, which is where I realized that I can actually start talking about architecture. You, I mean, I don't call it like it's not a musical notation, or you're finding which looks uh,
I think it's breaking a bit.
okay.
Uh, no, it's a bit low signal now.
than the previous
Uh,
two internet connections. Yeah, you have to send me a
think
text message for that.
for the voice is breaking. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, it was a really good workflow. The
What to
may,
He will join back, I guess. Did he just made music? When he was breaking it, some sort of music was coming out.
uh, like I think the earlier connection was working well. All right. Maybe I should share screen until um Sabu is back. So this is the TED software which is developed. Did I? Okay. Thought. Hmm. Oh, I see. But I don't see. So can you hear us? Hmm. I don't know if it's a restream issue or internet issue.
I think it's internet only because we both can see.
Yeah. Like because like restream sometimes like you might feel the screen is frozen and it uses all the bandwidth for the live. So even if like
Oh,
we see the movement like of other person, the other person see us as frozen. 3D draw. Huh, okay. Right. Hello.
yeah, yeah. Sorry. Uh, I hope I've tried to put the dongle at a different location. I hope it works. I don't know
It's
why.
much
I'll
better.
have to complain to the provider. I'm sorry whether just let me know whether I'm going too fast, too slow, or am I being too dramatic in my.
Yeah, I think like I really like how you're combining theories and like the best is like you're going like a very first principle approach on like taking
Right,
things
right.
and like the
Yeah, yeah.
need
So,
and
so,
like which
so,
is
yeah, yeah. So the thing is, what happened in '89? I'm trying to figure out. See, I never really got into thinking that I'm a pioneer in this area or I'm the first guy to do it or anything of that sort was not the important thing. Like we say in Hindi, like "papi pet ka sawal hai." Like I have to run my show, and I have to make sure that I do a reasonably good job of it. And it really did bother me that I have to deposit some things which I can look back and later on retrieve it, right? you know
hmm
that was the core lesson from Hafiz's office, that we are doing a lot of times we are chugging along on a design path and then we can't look back and learn our lessons. In fact, the same architect many times takes a look at his drawing and wondering, why did I do this detail? I don't know why I did this.
yeah.
Because nobody knows why they did that you know and there are plenty of stories of how that has happened, and it's there in every architect's office. They are scratching they're embarrassed. Some of them are embarrassed with their old works. They don't, because they don't know what the hell they did there you know
hmm
that's why if you see, you don't have the advantage of seeing a very young 25-year-old Charles Correa's works, or a
Mhm.
25-year-old Frank Gehry's work, or a 25-year-old Louis Kahn's work. By the time people mature, it takes a lot of time, and but you have wasted a lot of. You're like a drunk bird who's trying to build a nest without knowing how to really build it. Like, and you say, "Oops, it didn't work out. Oops, it didn't work out. Oops, it didn't work out." In the meantime, you enter and played havoc with the entire environment, right?
Mhm.
And you became an old man, like, to start realizing, oh, now I think I can do a better job of being an architect. But this kind of legacy of how we've been doing architecture has not been contested. People have been doing this as if that's the way you have to do it, under the guise of creativity, you know and you end up with a linguistic mess in whatever. We were doing a huge linguistic mess in our physical drawings, and we are still doing a huge linguistic mess with what is called as BIM files. Okay.
Mhm.
Like, to give a very important thing, I am very angry with I'm frustrated. I'm telling architects that, you look at the irony of this. We are in a pandemic. I just recovering from COVID now. Okay. And the virus travels through spaces,
Mhm.
and spaces are something which we ended up modulating. We can't create space, all right, but we modulated. We put two walls here, and therefore we confine space like that. We put it like this, you confine space in a different way.
Mhm.
And we should have opened up our data. You're supposed to say, oh, BIM is the big panacea for everything, and we can put up everything. Open up your data now. Society needs it. Go
Yep.
and put up theories about how this, at least starts this theories. Start the theories that, okay, I made this housing colony, and it turns out in that housing colony which finally got constructed, there's a lot of COVID cases. So let me open up my BIM files or whatever and say, okay, maybe this is the kind of configuration of spaces that's called hypothesis creation, right? I mean, what's the scientific method? It's got three steps. You have to have a hypothesis to begin with,
Mhm.
based on some prior data. Okay, you can't go there and, oh, I'm standing in the building and I'll create my own hypothesis there. You have to have prior data, and then create some theories, then figure out testing conditions for those theories, then test it out in the field and check whether it is there. But no, there is not a single real concerted effort on figuring out what type of space modulations led to what kind of, could lead to what kind of spreading of these viruses and all that. And this is the second time this is happening. I had a personal encounter about 3 years back, where there's a horrific thing happening in Bombay, which is the spread of incurable tuberculosis. And there's this bunch of really sincere doctors. They are working in this rehabilitated slums. They kind of gave some weird concessions to builders for their avarice. And they said that, oh, just clean up all those jokotpattis now, and just
Mhm.
construct big towers. Okay.
Oh.
And give major concessions. The buildings are literally like this much, literally.
Mhm.
So at the lower end, there is no sunlight coming in there. It's about 8 feet away. Imagine 25-story building. The next building is just 8-10 feet away. So it's
Mhm.
crazy, and it's become such a hotbed for tuberculosis. So so these doctors called me and said, oh, you're a theoretician in this area, and I'll just help us and figure out why is it there is so much incurable TB in this place. And I'm going with a bunch of other architects and so-called theoreticians in our field, and I'm saying that, is this the way we create a hypothesis? You stand in the mess of the whole thing and then start erupting with theories. Is that how you do scientific method? You have to have a neutral distance from the whole thing, with neutral data, prior data, form theories, and then go and test whether this kind of configuration of spaces would work or not. So all
Mhm.
this kind of highlights the point that our lack of responsibility of depositing data into, in a way which can be retrieved, is such a phenomenally flawed and ill discussed situation today. People are not discussing, they're not debating it. People are starting
Mhm.
from a particular datum on computing nowadays. They assume that that, oh, computers have all solved it. It's all there. It's all done. It's all done. It's all done. It's all done. All you have to do is just start from here, and then do all your theories from there. I mean, so many well-meaning people said, "Oh, you why don't you do it in AutoCAD? Why don't you do it in SketchUp? Why don't you do it in ArchiCAD, Revit, whatever? You pick your favorite software and plug it in." And I'm saying that, hey, hang on, this part of the discussion nobody has debated with architectural concepts. This
Mhm.
part of the debate, nobody has discussed architectural concepts there. If you study, so there are two three axes to this whole thing about TAD. One was in linguistics, and the lack of clarity of linguistics. There are certain basic simple things, like one thing I told you about production, right? The other
Mhm.
thing is to do both with linguistics as well as in mathematics. It's that the core ingredient have to be indifferent. It cannot participate in your this communication. Like C sharp, if I write something in C sharp and D, the C sharp should not yell out and say it means something. The
Yep.
letter A cannot mean something which is different from letter B. They are all completely indifferent things. The same thing with mathematics. Okay, it's actually called, the in probability theory, it's called principle of indifference. You cannot have the things which you are depositing, that piece of data with itself participating in whatever your theory is.
Correct.
That's not going to work out. So here you have BIM files. Oh, you have families of models of beams and doors and whatnot, and that is what you have to use. I mean, that's crazy. It's like saying that the only way I can learn mathematics and addition is by bringing in analogies. Like when we were kids, we said, okay, here are two apples, and if I bring one more apple, then I'll get three apples.
Yep.
So are you saying that for the rest of my life I have to deal with apples to understand addition? I mean, that's crazy, right?
Mm.
So there's one thread of examination in TAD which is to do with real core linguistics. It is not linguistics from the point of view of spoken language, okay, which
Yep.
most of linguistics actually, a lot of linguistics is dealing with spoken language, like things like generative grammar, universal grammar, and how does a baby get the language, and all that that is also important. I'm talking about
Mhm.
a different set of kind of linguistics, which is which there are very little material. There is this very interesting research by Genevieve von Petzinger. You can look it up. I'll give you the link later. She did some remarkable research, and she has this hypothesis that, contrary to popular belief, that the pictographs which you used to see in cave walls and all, and these pictographs are actual analogs of the world around you. Like, so that caveman saw some bird or something, that's what the theory says, used to say. And so you kind of draw that bird over there, or you draw a bull's head over there and things like that. I have some presentation, if you're interested, I can tell you that. And what she discovered is that over a period of almost 40,000 years, it's not like 1 or 2 years, odd years here and there. It's stayed consistent for a span of almost 40,000 years. This is before written word came in. Like, when you talk about the Semitic scripts and all that, using clay tablets and all that thing, um, is only 5,000 6,000 years back. But
Mhm.
what she was talking about are symbols which are used literally during, I mean, for a period of almost 30 40,000 years. And many of those symbols are actually pure abstract symbols. Okay.
Mhm.
So there is this principle of abstraction which needs to be there, again, because of the principle of indifference. That if you the thing which you are going to deposit for others to talk about has to be indifferent from whatever your actual further meaning is. Like if
Correct.
you write the word apple, okay, the word apple itself will have its own controversy. Does it mean the fruit? Does it mean Beatles record? Does it mean the Apple IT company? Does it mean doctors or whatever, like, right?
Mhm.
But the letter A, the letter P are going to be indifferent. It does not have
Correct.
any associations with it. Okay, so it's a similar thing which with Genevieve was saying. You can look up her TED talk. That's practically the only thing which I've really learned. So it's when I say it's there's a linguistic challenge. I'm not talking about spoken linguistic. I'm not talking about human language. I'm talking about expression of a very specialized areas. For all you know, these caves were like recording booths of those days. You know, where
Yeah.
the legacy of that uh, uh, particular what you say uh, era and culture was being recorded. It is not that they were speaking things. You know, it's like tally marks, for example. You know how much grain barley you have or whatever. You know that people know about it, but there are many other things, maybe supernatural things which they believed in. They wanted to record, or they just want to keep some private family secrets, whatever. So
Mhm.
there is a kind of a specialist language, and that deserves its own linguistic analysis. And that's the birth of things like the musical notation, or you talk about the mathematical symbols, like you talk about um uh, say the integration sign. Like, okay,
Mhm.
you know, these are all very neutral symbols. Nobody's going to get offended. Oh, you use the integration sign. I'm not going to read your theorem. Like, I don't want to get into your theorem. I mean, that's not going to happen, right? It's because they are neutral and because they are abstracted. That is why you can actually discuss amongst two mathematicians and make some sense of that.
Correct.
What we've been doing is very risky, and it's been very flawed, and it is actually at the root of a lot of very, very horrid things happening in architecture, because we are not opened up our communication of design in using these kind of principles. We are using, actually, if you look at linguistics again, the technique we are using is called pictograms, because it actually is a visual analog of what really happens in, like, if you really see a building being constructed, you actually
Mhm.
would see that floor plan over there,
Mhm.
right? The one which you drew, the more or less is what you see there. And this is looks very convenient, right? I mean, you have this drawing here and you have the floor plan there, so what's the big deal about this, is what people think. The thing is that these are not no longer analyzable. They're not
Mhm.
analyzable at all. Only if you stand over there and interpret it as a human is when you really start understanding. Just like the people who drew all those pictographs on the cave walls, they didn't think that they were doing anything illegible.
Mhm.
It's only later on we're all standing in front of that. You look at this Harappan seals and all that, and they're all visual analogs of certain animals and whatnot, and we have no clue what the hell they mean, like, because the ingredients itself is setting off your brain into 100 different directions and pulling you away from whatever that thing is supposed to mean, right? So in 99 in Liverpool, I had submitted a paper called The Importance of Being Abstract, that it's so critical for models to be abstract.
Mhm.
Okay, and at the same time, I do agree that there is a need to finally get you the final drawings. And in architecture, there are two, three more complications. In fact, there's one complication which is very similar. You can see it in music, which is the figure ground problem. If you don't see that in, say, mathematics, you don't see that in English, but you do see it in music, which is the problem of figure and ground. So if I were to represent music, I can't just represent the notes which are being played. I have to also represent the spaces between the notes. The same set of notes with different spacing, that means different periods of silence, will obviously sound very different. So, and when you see the music notation stuff and the way they go around describing music, they will have to represent both these things. They'll have to represent the notes as well as the spaces between the notes. Without
Mhm.
that, the music cannot be played. So one of the another thing about these kind of language constructs is that it has to be fairly all encompassing. So you cannot leave one part of the story out and say that, oh, I've got enough of the material and we can just make the building with that. And which is where the problem comes, because if you look at history, And if you look at the history of drawings, the one of the most impressive feat of drawings was when this very hot tempered clock designer and uh, uh, Brunelleschi, he won the competition for figuring out how to construct the dome on the Florence cathedral that was about
Correct.
20-story high. Okay. And if you go up to that part and try to construct a building. I mean, it was a crazy challenge, right? And he just solved it very elegantly, and he solved it with a set of drawings. Like, he figured out that there were some construction errors in the springing point of those dome, and that's why he made this double barrel dome. I mean, there are two domes, one below the other, and there's this kind of a steel cable around it so that it doesn't kind of fold out and all that, to correct the mistakes. And he had to do it with a kind of a suspended mm, uh, shuttering, because this is 20
Hmm.
story up. This thing was hanging up in the air for 50 years before they said, forget it, we have to finish this cathedral, right? And there was a plague and all that those days. So that thing was so impressive that the use of drawings, because that was a time when descriptive geometry and projections and sections and elevations and all, they all came up during that period, right? And what we forgot is that drawings were made specifically for the construction of that building, not really for the designing of the building. Okay.
Hmm.
And that these are two different things, and I
Correct.
sometimes struggle to explain to people, and I'm still struggling. I hope I can make this easier to understand. I don't know whether I'm getting across. See, it's that's why I resort to analogies, and it sometimes sounds like a straw man argument, that it's like telling somebody that, oh, I'm a cook, I cooked this dish, and here is the dish. Okay. Like, it's in some of these Japanese restaurants, I've heard that they have this nicely artificial looking dishes kept in the display, which is actually not eatable. They are made out of plastic or whatever,
Yeah.
you know and it looks very real, like it looks very tempting. I think it was designed to attract foreigners who can just point to that particular, I want that dish or whatever,
Yeah.
like that. And but that's not the dish, right? That's not the dish. So here you're talking about a system which was made, and it's a pretty elegant system for that specific narrow purpose of construction. Okay. And now you're sitting down and saying that, oh, that has become the norm, and let's forget
Yeah.
about the process of the cooking which led to it. I mean, that is strange. Like, I mean, how can
Yeah.
the kind of ingredients which I go put inside the initial stages of cooking is very different from what comes out at the end. Same is the case with architecture. I would, in my mind's eye, I would say that I want to say design a. Uh, uh, I'll give you a simple example. Let's say that 10 of us are getting together and we figure out that we need a space of 225 square feet. Okay, 15 feet by 15 feet to begin with, say. Okay,
Hmm.
that's comfortable for us to congregate and all. So so who decides that 15 feet by 15 feet is what 225? Why not 45 feet by 5 feet? And I'm like,
Hmm.
45 by feet 5 feet isn't it too narrow? But then
Hmm.
you say, what if it was a cricket pavilion where we are meeting, where you have a
Pitch. Yeah.
narrow strip of 45 feet, and all 10 of us ex-IITians getting together enjoying the cricket, and we want to, and that's a nice atmosphere in that case. So suddenly, like, what looked like narrow and what looked like comfortable, they all start changing, right? So you, unless and until that space itself has got a physical reality in the
Hmm.
mind of the architect. Okay, something which he is going to sit down and grapple with. If that system is not even allowing that, and say, oh, whatever you want to think about, you please think about it on your own. Okay. And later on, once you're ready, then you can put your data there, which is what the BIM people are doing. They are not even understanding what is this whole hoopla about. They're saying that we have given you such nice software tools to sit down and create all the things, and it's got scripting, and you can do all kinds of programming in it. It's all kinds of song and dance. And see, we have this, AI methods and machine learning which will figure out the way. I said, how are you going to figure out the way whether 15 feet by 15 feet is right, or 5 feet by 45 feet is right? Because it's all so highly contextual. So
Correct.
in actual architecture modeling, the actual physical real world we are all in does not have neutral ingredients, right?
Mm.
The- you know One of the misunderstood things about mathematics is that people kind of think that maths has got all the answers. You just give it to some machine learning, okay, and it'll figure out like how to. And I've seen a lot of song and dance going around with this. I will give this shapes and this shape. I said that, come on, like the people whom I'm designing for, okay, I'm sitting in my architect's office, and in my table in front of me is a young married couple. They have put their entire life savings
Yeah.
and they're just starting off on their journey of life in an apartment which I've designed. And it is so heart wrenching to hear them argue amongst themselves, okay, because it's going to create a lot of anxiety. I'm going to sit down and work, live in that apartment for next how many years, right?
Yep.
And here the artist says, no, my AI software has figured out what to do it. It went and did song and dance, and, and it didn't bring in the reality of that young couple over there. So I have a lot of quarrels with conventional
It's a big
AI.
disservice to humanity.
Yeah, it's a big problem. It's a huge problem. There's a lot of avarice here. There's a lot of pushing of materials here. There's a lot of details which get pushed into architects' offices. There's a lot of money going into the research, which is silently funded by some glass companies, which gets routed into a university, and the university funds some BIM programs and research and whatnot, and then that gets filtered down, and then it comes as I was sitting in an architect's office, a terrible set of architects, frankly, but that's a different story. And I was happened to be in that architect's office, and in walks in a bunch of very smartly dressed guys from a glass company. Okay, they had their own
Mm.
projector, they had this nice, uh, nice handout
Material.
bag with nice
Yeah.
goodies, and they had their oon pen drives which they give to all the architects. The pen drive had this all the BIM details of all the spider joints for the glass
Mhm.
facades which needs to be built into that particular thing. And the architects are saying, my god, like, I mean, they felt like they're being made love to over there, that the whole gang of people are coming here, and with all projectors and pre-made drawings and everything, and it looked as if that's the best possible way to go about designing. That's sad, like that we are not sitting down, and we've been led by our noses into this various avarice of people, and in this bitterly cold climate of Bombay where it snows every day. You're
Yep.
putting up these glass facades, okay, with the spider joints only because you got all the BIM details for it. I mean, it's
That.
absolutely madness, like absolute madness. So, and after that, even after that, if you say that, oh, you know what, we've worked it out, we got so many research programs which will do all the energy calculation. I said, give me some systemic theories for those poor people who are suffering from incurable TB. What, give me
Mm.
some systemic method with you open up your data and tell me what's happening to COVID. you know of all the theoreticians, people are literally scrambling everywhere. Like, you take epidemiologists, you take statisticians, you take probability people involved in probability. I mean, you take any specialized field. I think even physicists are now entering the fray and offering hypotheses on how on earth this bloody pandemic is spreading and all that. Architects are keeping quiet. I'm
We had this
discussing with.
big opportunity to like
Yeah,
use
I
the
mean,
building data
I'm
and
actually raking this up in some architects, and they're wondering, what is Sabu saying? What are we got to do with COVID? I don't understand what is we got to do with COVID.
mm,
This is this is the tragedy of I mean, the quality of our own internal examination of what we are doing. right?
Yeah.
So this is the now at the core. If you didn't have this language constructs correct, if you didn't have that correct, how on earth are you going to talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning and whatnot? Your basic foundation itself is shaky. You
Yep.
have a bunch of IFC classes, for example. And there's a whole lot
Mhm.
of coding. I've done extensive coding in IFC. I mean, somebody said that, okay, can you solve this problem? I said, yeah, it's a construction problem, and IFC can be suitable for handling the representation at the construction stage. So I have a
Mhm.
whole sort of programming which I've done in IFC. I have, you can take a look at it. It's called queryprojects.com, and using that, it actually replaces Revit and Navisworks. So it has got its own scripting language, and you can put a IFC model and a Microsoft project, and it'll help you figure out what is the critical path and visually show all that. Very narrow use. The horses are all run away. The building is already finalized. At that stage, it is fine. But what about the design stage? What about the
Mhm.
stage at which you want to go about designing? A lot of things which is happening in automatic generation of drawings and or design. Sorry, they are all based on very very faulty ingredients to begin with. If you didn't,
Assumptions. Yeah.
yeah, if your initial axioms itself were wrong or incorrect, how on earth are you going to build any kind of automation or AI or artificial intelligence or whatnot? If you want, I can show you something which I can do it in TAD, which will be a little bit more difficult if you were to do it in other software. So I don't know,
Definitely.
is this all making sense, or am I going too fast and am I spreading myself
Nah,
in many different areas?
I think like this might be the first interview where I just ask my first question and it itself that can become a podcast episode. I didn't
I'm
even
sorry.
get a chance to ask. Yeah, so I
Yeah,
think like
so I've been in this area for such a long time, and I investigate very very like a schoolboy. I get into that particular subject, and I'm saying that I'm asking simple questions and people are not answering these questions. You know, people are caught up in the superlatives of how the user interface of that thing looked like, and I'm saying, you know, multiple axes are there in this issue. The issue of linguistics is one, issue of big data is another one. People are just assuming there's this black box, you can just push
yeah.
a lot of data into it and it'll just keep receiving data, no problem. I mean, you have more issues, I'll just add more data. And that's called the problem of infinite regress. You know, it's a philosophical problem. You can't have an explanation which just goes to and fro, like you sitting in a barber shop and looking at your reflections. The reflections will never end. So a lot of the modeling system which is available today, you take anything, you take grasshopper, you take rhino, you take any of these things, none of them are really addressing the big data problem. If you really, they're just saying, oh, you will just get more RAM, that's it. In
Hmm.
fact, in many offices it's kind of standard practice. You know, I was horrified. I said, you are accepting this. They start the computer, i7 computer, 16 GB RAM, whatnot, and they go for a coffee when Revit is starting. Okay,
Oh,
just to
yeah, yeah.
start Revit. Okay, and they go for a coffee, and then they come back and then they load the model. They again go for a coffee. I said, this is, I mean, this, I don't know. I'm not the one who wrote the software. I
Yeah.
mean, this is how it works. So you kind of normalize it. You think that's the way it is. And it's amazing the amount of people who use software as if like it's some black box. And they give some, you know, minor breadcrumbs of excitement of, oh, I'll do grasshopper, you know, visual programming on top of that. For what joy? I mean, what did you achieve with all this? I'm sorry,
Yep.
you were saying something. I interrupted you again.
No, no, like you are pointing out facts which like I don't know the scene in India, but like it's a global topic to discuss, and like if the foundation is not stronger, like strong linguistic approach in architecture, like there should be a systematic change or theory. Like it's high time.
Yeah, so that is where I got involved in things like fractals and I have a friend who keeps debating with me. He's saying the fractal is to do with geometry and all that, which is not really true. If you look at the history of fractals, it was to do with information efficiency. If it is to do with detecting errors in information. In fact, Mandelbrot discovered fractals while analyzing problems of repeated problems in data transmission. Nothing to do with vision, nothing to do with the actual looks of the things. So in fact, that is a basic misunderstanding in geometry itself. People are playing around with parametric design and geometrical design as if it's got a life of its own. Your
Yeah.
actual parameters you have to handle is life has got its own set of parameters. That poor
Hmm.
guy who just married his sweetheart, and he's really like struggling to start his own house, is wanting to make love in the new apartment he and she bought, like. And you are sitting down saying that cannot be parameterized. It is really crazy. Like, when you look at humanity, and if you look at mathematics, h- it's the first time I'm seeing mathematics saying that this kind of maths is only for the rich.
Mm.
It is only for the rich, and it's only for that privilege. It's not only for that section of humanity who has got this BIM families and the beam families and the column families and the door families. The poor guy who came from the village, okay, and ended up with one what do you say, a hut made out of tin and everything, okay. And he's got this plastic tarpaulins and half broken things. It is going to be very tough to tell that person that your spatial needs is not important in my modeling, like. That is crazy, like, I mean, so there is fundamentally something very wrong in the way we are going about even examining what architecture really is. If you say
Mhm.
architecture is confined to only this lot of people who can really support all the avarice of people, who's going to push glass, and who's going to push this kind of very clear defined geometries of built matter. I mean, how on earth are you going to talk about it as a generic investigation into this subject? I,
Yeah. Uh, I think like it's already 1 hour 7 minutes, and
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
I
So,
was thinking
if
like
you do, you want
uh,
me to show something so that it gets more structured in what I am talking about?
yeah, I was thinking like we can like uh, have like some demo and code and then wrap up the interview. Maybe we should do part two, because like if there's a lot of
Yeah,
things to uncover, and like if we give all the
yeah,
dose, it
yeah,
might be
yeah,
like
yeah.
a very long
Yeah,
session.
yeah,
Yeah.
it may be just too long, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just building up this case, and there are many other axes also which needs to be opened up and discussed, rather than saying that Paul Verghese, my friend, is saying that it's not like music has solved all the representation. I'm not talking that music has solved representation issues or anything. That's a wrong assumptions which I've made. I am just saying that even a subject as evocative as music will have its own neutral alphabets. It's something very banal, actually. Nothing much more than that. Don't read more than what I've said. Like, okay, so it is not to do with saying that, oh, they solved all the representation issues. I'm saying that they made the attempt to really say, okay, let's get some part of the thing sorted out. Okay, it's like saying that this in IIT we had this debate between the objective and the subjective. Subjectively speaking, I think this is way, but objectively, I said it. Let the objective speak by itself, right? Let the subjective will speak on its own anyway. Like. So this whole thing about I'm not trying to go for a perfect representation system which will solve everything, and there's no perfect set of alphabets which is going to represent everything. So that's a wrong assumption, Paul. What you're saying, that's not what I meant at all. Like, the way we have to ask ourselves is that, can we arrive at least the debate? I'm not saying
Mhm.
that my system should be the one should be adopted, but I'm at least sticking my neck out and saying that I've got this set of abstract uh, for want of any terms, you can say abstract alphabets, which constructs the logic of whatever which is there. You understand? So let me, without further ado, let me show you what that means, so that it becomes easier for people to understand this. Otherwise, it becomes, as you
Mhm.
rightly said, there are many things to discuss in this.
Yeah.
I'll just open up my Prezi. I have
Mhm.
a short explanation of the very core thing which goes into this system. Okay, you can see my screen.
Not yet.
Yeah, I'll show you 1 minute.
Uh, Now, yes.
You can see, right? So all these
Mhm.
things I spoke about in some form or the other, about speech and everything. Let me jump the history of architecture representation and how we were representing earlier, and we were using physical models, and all this we covered. Okay,
Mhm.
so let me go into what how TAD does it. So the challenge which I have solved, or I'm offering, I'm not saying I'm solved it. Otherwise, Paul will again jump at me. It's not a solution as the final solution or anything. It is saying that there is a debate here, and this is my theories on the table, and now you have to sit down, and even if you disagree, you can argue at this level and come up with an alternative. But I don't want something to be an argument here with an argument something there, like, which doesn't make any sense. Like, so the idea is not to say that this is the perfect way to go about doing it. I am saying this is the one which seemed to have fitted in all these years of various examination. So one of the things is that architecture has got this figure ground illusion problem. So are you talking about the space, or are you talking about the bit matter? But the reality is that you're talking about both, and you need
Mhm.
to talk about both with as little redundancy as possible. Then you have another issue of just in time properties. You are talking about an element which needs to be dressed up with things which will come in just at the last minute. That wife will say, no, I want purple color to be placed here. And you can't say that, oh, I already worked out, my AI system has already figured out what is to be there, and the purple color cannot be accommodated there. So you have, this is the challenge of linguistics. Like, why is linguistics such a important subject? Because it gives this faculty of production. Anything can be written over there, and it needs to be written there. And then, can you iterate? Okay, can you iterate over the design? Can you iterate over whatever you are talking about? So this is where the core thing was. So if you look at it, it is using these concepts of fractals, and how it becomes. Let me first walk you through that. So you have to kind of start with an assumption that you hold the imagination of space as a tangible physical thing. Okay, think of it like a piece of jello, like, okay, which
Mhm.
is kind of you can hold in your hand. So the space itself is bereft of what created that space. I'm talking space from an architect's point of view. Not, there is only obviously just one universal space into which we intervene and start putting things, but I'm talking about things like rooms and doorways and things like that. So if you were to look at like that, think of it that there's an outer envelope. I'm just going to model one room here. Okay,
Mhm.
so that outer envelope, the whole envelope itself is full of this jello, like, okay,
Mhm.
that is, that's where it starts. And then you go and place what I call as atoms, which is another scoop of material inside that same jello inside that. Okay,
Mhm.
so this is a way by which you model in TAD. And then you put in another jello which is called a connector,
Mhm.
which connects the outer envelope to the inner atom. So now what happens is that this ends up with a invariance which you see here. Okay, so the actual built matter is a boolean operation between the from the outer envelope minus atoms plus connectors. So the atoms plus connectors you add together, and suddenly you find that you are actually started representing the built matter itself. Okay, so this is a very simple way to say that, okay, you are putting spaces to and arranging it in such a way that it will actually generate the built matter, and the emphasis first being on the spaces in this particular case. And you can start in other ways also. So now somebody says that how does this become a fractal system? So let's say that there is a table in that room. Okay, so the table itself will then become the same atoms, envelope, and connector. How is that happening? So if you now look at it, you'll find that the table has itself broken down into its own envelope here, and there's an atom here. There are no connectors as such. I could have put in connectors here if I wanted to, and then I would have got. I've now represented the table, and if you go in this fashion, you actually represent the entire any kind of architectural element, from buildings to nails to drawers to tables to anything. In fact, you can go to product design, you can do any kind of design. It's a different way of looking at of modeling, where if you want to get into the maths of it, and why this becomes efficient is because to do with how holes in manifolds will end up creating more and more data complexity. Why TAD is very efficient in handling its geometrical data is because none of these geometries actually technically has a hole in it. Everything is a completely contained volume. And because of that, the way TAD ends up handling data becomes very, very efficient. So this is the actual representation diagram, which explains what architecture can be represented in terms of both built matter and spaces. Like, so if you look at it, you have spaces as a set of atoms, envelopes, and connectors, and then built matter can itself be represented as envelopes, which again go back into atoms, envelopes, and connectors. So that's how it becomes recursive. So it's basically, if you were to put it in layman's language, it's like you first get into a building and you see the silhouette of the whole building. You don't know what all rooms are there in the building. The whole building itself is occupying space, right? It's like, say, you're walking into a building at a sunset. So you're seeing the entire silhouette. That entire envelope is one envelope, one volume, right? And then inside that, you walk into that person's house. So you go through the doorway, okay, which is a connector, and you go into one atom over there, and then you see a cupboard there. And the cupboard is initially, it looks like a chunk of wood over there, but then you realize that itself is atoms, envelope, connector inside. Somebody opens the drawer and you find that there are spaces within that cupboard itself, and then within this cupboard itself you then have drawers inside the cupboard, and each drawer itself is atoms, envelopes, and connectors. So it's basically a bunch of atoms, envelopes, and connectors everywhere. That is the fastest way I can tell
Yeah,
about this. There's a fair amount of pretty interesting mathematics inside this, and this is where the advantage is that it is actually agnostic to. It doesn't tell you which style of building it should be or anything like that.
correct.
Okay, it doesn't say that, oh, this is only for Indian buildings, or it's not meant for some. I mean, luckily we all have only one definition of actual universal space. You understand? And with because of that, it is actually pretty valid anywhere where you look at it. This is an invariance. You will find this collection of architecture architectural elements being represented like this.
Yeah, like
So
the logical relationship provides like a huge semantic knowledge when like things
right,
get
right. That
complex.
is where the
Like it,
advantage is. Right? So that's why I can talk about buildings very, very tersely. In TAD, you can talk about. I'll show you now the software itself. Let me just stop this, and I'll show you my software. So if you look at it, this is what TAD looks at this thing. Uh, and if you look at the way these are the kind of file sizes it talks about.
KB. I see.
Okay, so if I were to talk about, say, a hospital, okay, which I've done, it's there in uh, there's a hospital somewhere here. Yeah, and this is 274 kilobytes. Okay. Now, why is this possible? Like it actually, I have not even fully explored the entire use of this classification. I have a few files where I have, but this is not one. Even then, it is pretty terse because it's not just object orientation. It's not just this classification which is helping, but it is also the way I'm going around, allowing the architect to go around, creating their own classes and objects. It's actually an object oriented programming system itself.
Oh, that's
Okay, so
awesome.
when you look at this, say I can see this in 3D, for example. It's a three-storied building. It's not a very large hospital, but pretty reasonably large hospital. And it will take a fair amount of effort if you are to do the same thing in some other software. And the reason is they are not looking at it from an architect's point of view at all. So this is just obviously the raft view, and it does not have the slickness of Rhino and all that. But there are things which you can do here. I can logically hide certain elements, and I can look at the partial data over there, and I can do that using that those terminologies of atoms, envelopes, and connectors and all. I can say, show me only the envelopes, show me only the connectors, show me only the atoms. Okay, and because of that, you can actually and do that even programmatically instead of doing it using this thing. Right? I'm doing it visually, but you can do this theoretically. It doesn't get nothing stops it from being done programmatically. So if you want to really analyze a building and talk about it, so let me show you something which did use the classification system. I'll have to open it here. And if again, this is if you see, it's not a fully designed building. The outside and elements and all sajjas and sunshades and all are not there. In fact, I don't think I've gone around really placed windows also. And yet it has enough intelligence for it to run to run a Ardala. The scripting engine inside it's called Ardala, architectural design language. It is based on Prolog, and using that I can actually do a full BMC analysis and say that these are the areas and carpet areas and built up areas and the kind of quantities which emerge, and it is being done even though the building is partial. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
the building is partial.
It's amazing. I'm wondering, like, for example, this also reminded me of topologic software. I'm not sure if you're aware,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
because
yeah. There is a software. This thing, this in the OS Arch community, there is one topologic which is there, but I am not in that line, that way of looking at it. I am very, very trepidatious as far as programming is concerned, because if we end up wanting to bring in a lot of complex data structures and all that, of course at this stage of my
yeah.
life I have enough expertise to do all that and bring in, but I'm very, very careful about how do I preserve the simplicity of the internal ingredients. It's like saying that if I have 26 alphabets to represent English, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to fight with myself tooth and nail before I bring in the 27th alphabet. I would first try to reduce the 26 alphabets to 25 alphabets. If you were to understand the metaphor which I'm trying to say. So
Yep.
when you are talking about a complex beast, and mind you, this is not just about the building, it
Mm-hmm.
is about the process which leads to the building also, right? So
Correct.
that's why when you talk about designing, this is what happened at the end of the process of designing. It didn't start like this. It didn't drop in like manna from heaven and then ended up as a building over there, right? It came up with a lot of trials and tribulations, that should I make this here. So I have things like which is logically absurd, right? I mean, this sunshade is now intersecting this particular wall, but I need to let that architect decide whether it needs to be imbalanced like this. That's the whole idea of the whole process, right? If I sit down and say, oh, I this is not topologically right now, it is not topologically right at this stage. What you see here, you're talking
Mm-hmm.
about intersecting volumes, and intersecting
Correct.
volumes don't happen in the in the real world. Okay, so I don't want to go around cleaning it up right now and put in some automation to get that topology right. Okay, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it's right, because finally the answer is with the architect to sit down and figure out what is there. I am completely against a lot of automated shape generations and form generations and things like that. In fact, in TAD, once upon a time, I'll show you that particular project. I removed that routine from it, but I think I still have that project, which is which one is this? There's not this Algiers complex. It's a project where I was doing this in a very complex kind of. All these projects are sample files are there when you install TAD.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I wanted to show you that, not Diamond Palace. One minute, I have to see it in a little bigger size. Yeah, this one. So what had happened is that I had this odd plot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I developed a routine which automated the placement of this multi-storied buildings here. If you see it in 3D, uh, uh, and what it did is that it said, okay, here is the weird plot of land, and I want to now go around constructing this. Placing these buildings over there. Okay, and so I developed a routine which actually went around examining, and by trial and error it went around. It was like a nice animated movie, and you'll see these
Mm-hmm.
blocks actually moving around very cleverly and going around figuring out, okay, it's almost like it had a life of its own to figure out where it should be placed so that the setbacks and all which is needed by the municipality is respected. Then I started saying that, is that the axis on which you take a decision for placing your buildings? Just because the municipality gave you a particular set of setbacks, is that you freak out with generative design because you can freak out with generative design? You know, a lot of software designing, not just in architecture, is done as if like they said about mountaineering. Why did the mountaineer climb the mountain? I think a famous mountaineer was asked this question, and he simply said, because it's there. And a lot
Mm.
of software writing is written, oh, why did you write this routine? Because it's possible for me to write that routine.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that, why, for what joy? Like, so when I hear about, I mean the work on topologic and all those things are pretty elegant and come from a lot of nice research. But to give so much automation on cleaning up the thing and getting into the design as quickly as possible, I don't think that is the right approach. The human
Mhm.
understanding of that young couple sitting in front of me and arguing is a very important parameter to be also considered. So if I sit down and say that, okay, I don't have any method to bring in just in time properties, which comes just in time, you know,
Mhm.
I invented a term called just in time modeling. A lot of models are half done. That is a reality of architectural design. You can't
Mhm.
sit down and say, oh, I know every little parameter which needs to be considered. I know the sun rays, I know the wind speed, and I know this. And no, you don't. I'm sorry. Like, there's a situation where you need what Herbert Simon said, you need a satisfying solution, not a
Mhm.
satisfying solution. And for that you need indifferent ingredients. But architecture finally is not going to be indifferent. You have to take certain positions on that, and that can only be done when your tool does not dictate to you what is the position you should take.
I see.
I hope
Eh,
that is the
yeah,
yeah.
I
So
was
that's why
thinking
many
like,
people find this a little crude. They say that where is the automation for this? How come this is an AI software? And the reason why it is an AI software is because of things like this. Sorry, in this it will not do because it's that the setting up of the data is not right. The one which I showed you earlier, like,
hmm.
right?
So I see a like point, like, a lot of times, like, even like we do energy analysis based on plugin, and like we don't know the underlying like optimization, and we just, because it can do
Yeah,
optimization, we
yeah,
run bunch
yeah,
of parameter, like we use the human logic. Why don't we
yeah.
filter out good
I mean,
solutions in first place?
there are times when you design a really smart and really nice building, even though it may not be that perfect climatically suited solution, because
Hmm.
there are multiple things which is catching the need of the requirements for that piece of architecture. So it's not just that you have to get that absolutely right climatic data, because there are other considerations which comes into the play. And if you start putting one thing after the other, as that also I'll automate it, and that also I'll bring in with machine learning, and that also bring in with that, you are just loading it up with so much amount of unnecessary fluff that
Yeah,
finally when the data finally emerges, you are talking about a completely unravelable mess of things when the time comes, when there is a issue which needs to be analyzed.
yeah, it's
A lot
already
of
complex enough. Why are
yeah
we
it's
adding more things?
yeah, you're just adding a lot of stuff into the whole thing, because on the guys of, this needs to be really optimized. For some reason there is a feeling that an architect really is struggling to work out shapes. I mean, I have this, face slap moment. I mean, I can suspend most architects upside down from a coconut tree and they will be able to visualize with a mark on the sand. And here there are software trying to claim that they can do a better job of visualizing thing.
Mhm.
And architects can't do that. Like, I mean, that's crazy. Like, I mean, that's we eat, drink, sleep, understanding spaces and forms and shapes and everything. And you are sitting down and saying that I'm going to give you some methods to really sit down and give you these shapes. Now here is one church which I designed where these things are actually parameterized. So it's not that it doesn't have parametric this thing. Like if you
Mhm.
see the hyperbolic parabola of this, you will understand that this hyperbolic paraboloids which you see in this is actually was not actually modeled here. You see only the one of the elevation, but the way the height changes for this hyperbolic paraboloid elements are actually parameterized. So it's not that you cannot do anything, but I don't want to do overkill of things just because you can do it.
Yeah, like there
So
should be purpose.
yeah, there has to be a reason, right? I mean, even if the reason is purely aesthetic, is also a reason enough. I mean to say that should not be. But I've seen so much frivolous use of generative geometry where people have not even figured why on earth they need that. You know, just because
Yep.
Grasshopper allowed it to do that, you did it,
Yeah.
and then you have created a huge set of problem for the maintenance team for the next 30 years, who has to
Correct.
clamber on all those weird shapes and then clean up all the crevices in between the various lattice work which you happen to lovingly create on Rhino or whatever. The thing is, you can't take a software which was meant for small little bottles and products and things like that, and blow it up and say that it is now available, possible for even buildings to do that. I mean, you're going to set into motion a lot of anguish and a lot of poor people who are going to construct that building and maintain it later,
Mm.
and then live with that. And if there's, god forbid, if there's a fire over there, and then you need to model in back and say, okay, what happened, where will the people run through this the spaces over there. In the meantime, you have cluttered it with so much amount of data of all the built material over there. You have no hope in hell to really do any simulation of the spaces there.
Yeah, like I wanted to know your thought. Like, so for example, like looks like when we like architects design, like they want something to stand out for their design, and like with technology and Grasshopper, like it gave a really good proxy. Like if I do some slider, oh, it makes look, and I can post on Instagram, like people will like, there are cool software
Yeah,
I can.
yeah.
So,
There was a very sharp comment which somebody made, who's not an architect, and he said that architects don't realize it, but a lot of architects are actually designing.
that's that's true.
We're not designing for real people around us, and we are sitting down and trying to win brownie points with each other. I mean,
Hmm.
for what joy? Like, I mean, the thing which really bothers me, and it's a very simple question. I don't want my great granddaughter to be embarrassed by whatever I've done. you know
Hmm.
and in one sense, I've kind of suspended my practice for the last few years because of it. Really bothers me. I'll say I'll make some fancy buildings because I've got some fancy software, including mine, if I consider that to be fancy, and say that, oh, you know what, I solved everything. And Paul Verghese keeps thinking that I'm trying to look for a very rigid methodology for architectural design. I'm not doing anything of that sort. I'm talking about very simple things. I'm saying that let the expressible things be expressible, let the thing which
Hmm.
is not expressible still be there. It's this thing which Richard Feynman, in his wonderful interview, you should see it on YouTube, he calls it the smell of scent of a rose. He's holding up an imaginary flower, and somebody's saying, oh, you physicists, you don't know anything about aesthetics and beauty or anything like that. And he said that, come on, like, I mean, if I hold a flower in my hand, I mean, the aesthetics of it is equally available to me as much as to anybody else.
Mm.
But if I were to analyze that particular flower and figure out what are the cell structures inside and how to represent that, and what all things happens between the cells, and whether can that particular, at the molecular level, can it dictate color, and will that attract the bees, and that sets off another set of questions about aesthetics and all that. That's an amazing set of things to be examined, right?
Hmm.
So, in
Yeah.
short, when you talk about a building, and when I talk about stuff to be represented in this format, I'm not trying to say that, oh, I'm going to stand like a Lord Moses with my 10 commandments and say that here are the ways by which you should design. You can design anything that you want, but whatever you design, I want to objectively analyze later on. So for me to take it from on my terms and understand my terms. you know
Hmm.
a lot
Yeah.
of architecture should not be excused on the layer of feelings. If
Correct.
I say that I have these feelings about this building, and that is what I'm going to now transmit to others. Hello, let the other guy figure out his own feelings. No,
I see.
everybody has got a right to figure out what feelings he or she wants. So in
Mm.
that very very unnecessary intellectualization, the real debate of talking about simple things like quantities and costs, and okay, let me figure out what happens if there's a fire here. I came up with this form because that church committee did not have money, and so I had to figure out what is the best way to reduce the cost. These hyperbolic parabolites are only 3.5 inch thick, so the amount of concrete work which went into it is very very little, like, for the same
Hmm.
amount of space which it shaded, like. So there has to be multiple reasons why a particular design has to become. So basically the thing is, let the objective reality of my design process and the product be available for objective reasons. The
Correct.
subjective things will always continue. I'm
Hmm.
not going to claim that because I used TAD, I became a great architect. I am nowhere, under no stretch of imagination, I've become any really meaningful architect. I've been trying to figure out my set of tools, and I'm cleaning up that part of the story and the linguistic part of the story. And I am telling people that, okay, let's start the debate here. You may not agree with me. Fine, no problem. I'm not saying that this is the panacea which everybody is looking for. But don't argue vacuously.
Hmm.
Don't argue vacuously. I've opened up a set of very fundamental questions, and that is the reason why I came up with atoms, envelopes, and connectors, and this fractal system, and the way the linguistics are being constructed. And I have very good reasons why I don't want to get into automation so directly.
Makes sense.
And so you first come to that level of debate and offer at an alternative. Otherwise, it'll all become very very intellectualized discussions. That's all what it will become.
Yeah, and like so, I think like we
Yeah,
could go on and on. So
yeah, yeah,
I'll
yeah.
wrap up the interview with like so one big question and one rapid fire. So one is like few things which you want to do with TED and your vision for next 3 years. Like ideally, if all the things are working out, what would you like to proceed and like revolutionize the industry?
Okay, so TAD is got a very nice way by which it can go into architecting even the what I call as the huddle dens on the internet. So it's
Mhm.
not just the spaces of the real world which you can talk about and model in this. So last 7 8 years, more than that, from 2012 onwards, 10 years now, I've been uh, working out the theories behind a concept known as huddle den. So huddle den is a core concept in architecture where we it's a portmanteau word between huddle and den. So we are a huddle of people who huddle together in various dens, various spaces
Mhm.
and architectural context. So I am recreating that, which can then be utilized either as regular buildings, or it can be used as what is nowadays popularly known as metaverses. When I was
Metaverse.
explaining what Huddle Den was, people didn't understand what the hell Huddle Den. So I now, thankfully, the word metaverses come in. So I say, okay, it is something like metaverse. I mean, metaverse is another completely different distraction
Yeah,
and
yeah.
unnecessary complications which people get into. But Huddleden is a very elegant, simple concept, and TAD is moving into that. And so
Mhm.
it can actually bridge very nicely between real world ways of working with the spaces in the real world, and then you have spaces working on the internet, and without getting into the glamour and glitz of virtual reality and augmented, which is
Mhm.
all rubbish. I mean, TAD was one of the first software which had I still have the export for VRML, and I got so disgusted with the underlying concept. Again, it was faddishness, and again, understanding. Virtual reality has got a biological limit. The kind of we have in our middle ear is not going to be suddenly in sync with whatever the fancy things which you're going to put into your goggles. Like, you're going to start puking. It's as simple as that, because the vision coming into your virtual reality glasses is going to be telling you that your visual context is in one situation, but your middle ears are telling you something else, and you can't go and put a screwdriver in the middle ear and keep tightening that as you keep
Mhm.
watching that VR. So all this esoteric ways of looking at it is all phenomenally faddish and kiddish, actually.
I
And
see.
we have to respect that the fact that we have a 2D monitor. It's as simple as that. It's as banal as that. Like, okay, and we can rework it once you have a really 3D. I have a kind of a plexiglass kind of hologram monitor, which is actually a physical 3D thing. Then I'll say that, yeah, we can get into talk about 3D in that sense. But till that
Got
time
it.
of thing happens, this is all silly. Like, so it's just unnecessarily distracting and throwing breadcrumbs of distraction into people who can be doing something a lot more meaningfully. So TAD is headed towards Huddledens, which is a lot more simpler to do that. It's got an extensive programming capability. It is, you can actually, all this logic and this fractal structures and all which I was talking about can be exported into practically all the languages which you want. So it's got a feature which I don't think any software really has this, where you can talk about exporting, including the internal data structures, not as an external
Ooh,
file. So it actually does code writing for you, and sets up all the internal data structures for you to further program. So it's not like that you can just extend it with some plugin and all. This is way more sophisticated than that. So all this is what is happening. It'll have a complete ecological system if you can call it an ecological system on the web, where there will be components which you can download directly into TAD and things like that. So there's a lot which is happening there. There'll be connections to IoT devices.
that's
Okay,
nice.
yeah, all that is happening. It's all getting
I,
tested. It's yeah,
I, I
and
like I'm more amazed like with the software engineering like challenge you have like accomplished through this. Like I could foresee like the back
yeah,
end and like
this is
state
not
of
a
the art.
one day.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
not a one day's work. It is like literally this has got a sometimes a sprint cycle, an agile sprint cycle of a day, all right. And there have been millions of days which has happened on this with a lot of really serious architects working on this, not just me.
That's incredible. So I will do a rapid fire round
Sure, sure, sure.
in so you'll have 10 seconds to answer the question,
Okay, okay.
and you got to keep it in 3 words, like maximum, or like couple of words. I'll give that flexibility.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Let's do this. So which city is in your travel bucket list?
Somewhere in US.
Okay. Uh, any technical or business book which made a big impact in your life?
Victor Papnik, Design for the Real World.
Uh, theory which you resonate the most?
Fractals.
Your hobbies?
I play the guitar and little bit of drums, and I sculpt and I paint and I write.
Anything which you wish you would have done differently?
Actually, nothing. Like I can only be very practical.
Okay. Your favorite movie?
Story of Eddie Lech, Truffaut.
Richard, if you have any question, you can ask too. Like, okay.
All good from my side, yeah.
uh,
I hope, Richard, I didn't disappoint you. You were eagerly looking forward to this, if I remember right.
You never disappoint me, don't worry. I am looking at your all the lectures, don't worry.
The problem with me is that I've never been corporatized. I started my practice when I was 25 years old. So I never really learned to mince my words or, to, 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 to window dress it. And I sometimes people think that I don't listen carefully. And partly that must have been true, I guess. But even when I do listen, people say I don't listen carefully. Like most of the time, people are wanting to have a validation of comfort zone rather than actually listening to me.
mhm.
So I ended up by
This
saying,
is
okay,
a
what can
deep
I
thought to
do?
ponder on. Yeah, but like
I could,
maybe next time if Mayur is doing any second sequel, we can talk about like we did talk about the problems, but the solutions that can be really helpful for the future
right, right.
generation or for also for right
I'm
now.
right. Yeah. I'm sorry that the lot of my discussion today was to build up the case for some very glaring bad intellectualization going on in our field. Very, very terrible thing, which is creating major havoc. And this is not something which I suddenly picked on because Corona came or that incurable TB came. I've been talking about it for years. I've been telling people that whatever it may be, you have to deposit things in a meaningful manner, right? And make sense of that, right? I mean, that was the core question which started off with Hafiz, right? Why should a nice
Mm,
person and knowledgeable architect go around doing shitty buildings? Like, simple as that. Like,
mhm.
so that means there is no real discussion going on.
Yeah. I hope it was like a eye-opening like session for me on the few aspect which I was taking for granted for sure. And as like last question I have is like, what is a piece of advice for young architecture technologist who wants to make an impact in the society with advancement in technology? So like from your
Very, very,
experience.
yeah, very, very healthy dose of skepticism. Don't start with datums given by somebody else, including me. You know, people start with a datum. You say, oh, we have Grasshopper. We start with that, or we start with AutoCAD. Like, I mean, they don't use the word AutoCAD, by the way. They say CAD. It's like CAD. Like, I mean, it's like as if they born with CAD in the mouth. Like, silver CAD in the mouth, like instead of a silver spoon in the mouth. Like. It's the same things what is happening with BIM. People are, it's actually called, read about something known as the fallacy of unanimity.
Hmm.
There's a serious intellectual fallacy called the fallacy of unanimity. When everybody is sitting down and thinking that that is the way to go, you have to sit down and say, hey, something is wrong genetically here. Like,
I see.
that's a way to look at it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the idea is to
Look
be
it up.
critical before your deeds.
Yeah, be very critical. Be critical about what I'm talking about. But let's have equal conversations. Not that okay, something on the table I have here and something up in the air is not a comparable way of debating.
definitely. Like do research, have valid points to criticize,
Yeah,
and
I
like
mean,
be on the
I'm
same
not
page.
here to, like, I am definitely not here with Moses with the tablets of this is a way to design. I'm saying this is a way to represent design process. You have another way to represent it. Be my guest. But let's not say that, oh, let's not have any representation at all, because we are architects. We cannot have, we're excluded from this kind of mere
But like
mortal problems.
I, it's also like built in. I don't know, like in education, like people are fantasize, and like there's a big gap
Yeah,
between
I mean,
education,
we
real
we
life.
we, we go around with very very sloplistic. I don't know what is the thing. Weird philosophies and half understood terminologies, and people talk about Jacques Derrida and all. I said, okay, let me read what the hell Jacques Derrida really said, and he said something useful also.
Yeah,
It's not that whatever he said was all rubbish, but a lot of rubbish got built around this kind of stuff.
yeah, narrative.
And made it unnecessarily more complex. Actually, Jacques Derrida talked about things like deference and logocentrism and pretty useful stuff if you really go to the core of what it is. I can actually talk about the concepts in TAD using Jacques Derrida's concepts in linguistics and post-structural linguistics and things like that. But the thing is, we kind of, a lot of us are not so that's the second thing which youngsters should do apart from skepticism is a lot of thoroughness in your research and detail,
Hmm.
a lot of depth.
First
When sometimes when I talk to people think, oh, I'm not from an academic institute, I didn't have any in all my paper presentations. I sometimes ended up as the only practicing architect who's talking theoretical stuff. When I landed
hmm
up in Frankfurt, I was the only practicing architect there. Everybody else is doing some PhD. So people kind of think that, oh, only the academicians can talk about academic stuff. And it's as weird
I
as
see.
saying only the practitioners have to talk about practice. That's crazy. Like, I mean, why this artificial classification? So the
Correct.
way sometimes, since I don't have this corpus language, people think that I'm not these kind of things. I go into crazy amount of depth of trying to understand what the heck it is all about before I try to simplify it and try to express it in my way. So that's the second thing which you have to do. Don't be a quack, please. It takes me 30 years to just come up with three terminologies, which is atoms, envelopes, and connectors. And
Yeah.
I'm sticking to those terminologies. It's not something which I just said like this because I wanted to use some jargon somewhere.
It's not like this generation of Instagram trending or viral. Like it
Right,
takes
right, right. It's
patience
not
and
that.
like
It
yeah.
takes a lot of self skepticism more than skeptics of others' theories. I have to sit down and be skeptical about what the heck I'm talking about.
hmm Yeah. So
So
I
there are two
just
habits. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, like that's great insight and definitely great piece of advice. So my last question is like, who's your role model or any architect, like your favorite architect you look forward to?
Uh, I think the world is should get over this need to have models and you know I,
Hmm.
I'm not here to talk about Sabu Francis or even what this particular model itself is. I'm talking about the underlying principles. So it's better to go for principles rather than for role models. And there's a
Correct.
lot of very nice fundamental principles, very simple things. Like one is uh, understand critical thinking very deeply, understand logical fallacies very deeply, understand cognitive biases very deeply. You get these three things done. You don't need any heroes to sit down and emulate.
Mm.
We've done a lot of hero worship of a lot of things. One of the biggest ironies, and it's quite a satire, that you meet architects and they want to do sustainable, and they're not going by the superficiality of things, and we want to be very, very clear about being fair to the world, and I don't want to be a male chauvinist, and I don't want to do man speaking and whatnot and all that, but I want very pretty looking pictures in my buildings.
Yeah.
Why don't you make a very dumb looking buildings which really perform really well, man? For God's sake.
There also like the problem with the media, like architecture magazines, and like they focus more on like, oh, highest tallest
Yeah, I
building,
mean,
best
there's
like they're.
so much prevalence on the visual things,
Yep.
that something visual should be the thing which should be captivating. And there's so much of trickery and magic of all the various permutation combinations of form generation and things like that, and the basic tenets of life is getting forgotten in the meantime.
Yep.
Basic
Like we just
simple
need
things.
like interviews of like people in the space where, okay, even though it's a normal looking building, like people are happy, like that should get like viral or more million views, or
Yeah,
like,
I
okay.
mean, let people's personal lives and their upliftment be the first priority, right? I mean, we are talking about, I'm staying in Navi Mumbai, and now they're talking about some major Florida size piece of Antarctica which may get cut loose from Antarctica, and all these places will be up with water, like. And
Mm.
on top of it, we have a set of stupid buildings on that, on our so-called the Palm Beach mark, with all these nice glass facades over there, all soaking in the sun because it's so cold here.
uh,
It's crazy, like. So there's a lot to be done, instead of sitting down and talking purely in terms of uh, of just aesthetics, and that too aesthetics, very narrowly defined aesthetics. I mean, why can't a nice smell be aesthetic? Why can't a
mm,
nice sound be aesthetic? Why can't a nice set of soft textures be aesthetic? you know why is it suddenly the shapes which comes up on the screen be aesthetic?
yeah.
So there's a lot of questioning which needs to be done. Anyway,
This,
thank you so much.
thank you so
There's a
much.
lot.
I'm very like fortunate that we had this session, and like definitely we should
I
do part
invite any
two.
of you to join me. Anybody listening to this, I've been telling people, you come and talk to me. I will open up my code. I'll show you. It's a lot of code. It's more than 3 million lines of code. Though the thing looks pretty raw, but it's actually a combination of three different programming languages which has gone into it. So there's a fair amount of effort which has gone into it. There's obviously a huge scope for improvement, huge scope for complete replacement of that with something else. But it has to be on equal ground. Again, I'm repeating. It can't
Hmm.
be intellectualized debates. Like, that's
Yeah,
all. So everybody is
we
welcome.
should we should integrate this. Sorry.
I wanted to make this completely open source. Unfortunately, I've used some. I mean, a lot of my code is in two legacy software languages. One is in Prolog, called Visual Prolog, and they have now changed the version quite a lot. It is no longer compatible. So that compiler itself not available. I requested the
Oh,
company that, can you make an exception and give it to my programmers who would want to work on this. So it really needs a lot of rewriting, and that is going to take a huge amount of time. Otherwise, I would have loved to make this completely open source.
yeah. That's
It's there on the cards, but I'm kind of stuck. I don't have funds for this. I Whatever funds I get, I'm the only reason I'm keeping this alive is this debate about linguistics in architecture. It's a mind-bogglingly neglected and very serious debate, uh, and which Paul is, and he's a friend of mine. He's written that big note over there, and I'm trying to tell him it is not about that. It is not about what I am talking about. That this
yep.
is just a vehicle to deliver this debate to the people. Right?
Yeah.
Thank you so
It,
much.
thank you so much, Sabu. It,
Thank you,
it
Richa.
was an
Thank you
eye-opening
so
session.
much from my. Yeah.
Thank you. Richa, where are you
See you
located?
around. Right now I'm in Meerut, India.
Oh, you're in India only. Okay, take care.
Yeah.
Thank
Take
you.
Okay.
care.
Bye.
Bye.